Hello. Well, welcome to Stories at 7, aka Jill and Ori, for folks that like a story. And what a story it's turning out to be! Nutcracker and the Mouse King. It's all kicked off, hasn't it? Sue, in the last one, was reading all about how it all kicked off, and there's a 7-headed Mouse King. Imagine that, a 7-headed Mouse King. I'm not surprised that Nutcracker's off with his sword, calling everybody to arms. Now, I've refreshed my false candles, so they should be a little bit more sparkly glittery. I could put one on my head if I wanted. And then it'd fall off and it wouldn't matter because it's false. Anyway, that is beside the wayside. Let's get comfy. And let's dive right back in to chapter 5, The Battle. So if you remember rightly, under the big table, squadrons of countless mice have all come running out, all fighting for the 7-headed Mouse King. So, beat the general march, my trusty drummer, cried Nutcracker at the top of his voice, and at once the drummer began a rub-a-dub in the most skilful way, so that the panes of the cupboard shook and echoed. Now came a crashing and a clattering within, and Mary saw that the lids of the various boxes in which Fred's army had been stored were thrust up, and out sprang the infantry, and down onto the lower shelf, where they fell into shining ranks. That means all standing together. The Nutcracker flew up and down, chivying along the troops in animated words. "Let no dog of a trumpeter blow or stir," he exclaimed angrily, and straightway turned to the Pantaloon, who I think is a very tall toy, who had grown somewhat pale, and with a telltale chattering of his long chin, and he addressed him in solemn tones. "General, I know your courage and your experience. Here, quickness of eye and decision are all important. To you, I entrust the command-in-chief of the cavalry and the artillery. You don't need a horse, as you have such long legs, and can gallop along with them well enough. Now, attend your duty." Quite possibly. Forthwith, Pantaloon pressed his long dry fingers upon his mouth, and gave such a piercing craw that it rang like the notes of 100 shrill bugles. Oh, he's obviously listening. I can't do it. Thereupon arose in the cupboard a neighing and a trampling, and lo, Fred's hussars and dragoons, but before all, the new gaily equipped hussars moved out, soon coming to a halt on the floor below. So they all came pouring out the cupboard, all ready to fight. Now, with flying flags and clanging music, regiment after regiment filed before Nutcracker and drew themselves up in 3 lines across the room. But in front, Fred's cannon advanced, rattling with their gunners about each, and presently they began to go boom, boom. Well, obviously probably in one direction. And Mary saw how their sugar plum shot, that's the little things that they were firing, sugar plums, plunged into the masses of the mouse army, who became all powdered all over and put greatly to shame. But particularly they suffered severe loss from a battery of heavy guns which had taken up its position on Mamma's footstool, and boom, 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 kept volleying out gingerbread nuts along the mice, which did much damage. Sounds quite nice. I'd probably eat them all. The mice, however, steadily advanced, and even came the length of taking a few of the guns, but still resounded the martial din, brr, boom, ping, brr, boom, till for smoke and dust Mary could hardly see what was going on. Yet this much was certain, that each army fought with the utmost determination, and that victory wavered from one side to the other. Clara and Gertrude ran up and down in despair and wrung their hands until they were sore. "Am I to die in my blooming youth, I, the fairest of dolls?" screamed Clara. Have I, for this, so carefully preserved my looks, to perish here within the walls of my home? cried Gertrude. Then they cried so loudly as to be heard all over the massive noise of the battle. For, worthy reader, you can scarcely have any idea of the scene that now waged. It sounds a right old hoo-ha, doesn't it? A confusion of pealing, thundering and roaring, amid which squeaked and squealed the mice and their sovereign. That's the Mouse King, the seven-headed Mouse King. And then again rose Nutcracker's commanding voice as he issued the necessary orders and could be seen hurrying up to his battalions in the thick of the fire. General Pantaloon had made some of the most dashing cavalry charges and covered himself with glory, but Fred's hussars were driven back by the mouse artillery, which left deadly marks on their red jackets. Oh, I think they've been nipping at them. And then a heavy column of fierce, ugly mice charged so resolutely that footstool, guns and gunners were all lost. Nutcracker seemed dismayed and ordered the right wing to come back. Now you understand, my dear reader, experienced in war as you are, that to make such a movement means much the same thing as running away. And along with me, you already lament the disaster about to come to the army of Mary's beloved Nutcracker. It sounds like Nutcracker and his army are going to lose everything to these horrible mice. Yet, turn away your eyes from this sad spectacle and regard the left wing. Now, is that my left or is that your left? Just look to your left, not my left. Anyway, look back to that side and then all goes well for the Nutcracker army. The soldiers and the commander gives them good hope. During the hottest of the fight, masses of mouse cavalry had been quietly creeping out from the chest of drawers, and with loud horrid squeaks they had furiously thrown themselves upon Nutcracker's left wing. But what a resistance they met! Slowly, owing to the nature of the ground, it being difficult to pass the cupboard ledge, the regiment of motto figures, I think they're like motorised figures, had advanced under the leadership of 2 Chinese emperors and formed themselves into a little square. These spirited, gaily equipped and noble troops, consisting of many gardeners, Highlanders, Japanese barbers, harlequins, cupids, lions, tigers, baboons and apes, fought courageously and steadily. By their bravery would this choice regiment have grasped the victory from the foe, that's the mice, had not a daring captain of the mouse cavalry rushed recklessly forward, bitten off the head of one of the Chinese emperors, and then the Chinese emperor, he fell over and knocked over 2 Japanese and a baboon, and that made a gap, and that meant that the mice ran forward into the square. As soon, and they started nipping, biting. But as soon as their bloodthirsty troops had bitten one of the Nutcracker's army in 2, he found a small slip of printed paper in his throat, from which he died immediately. Well, this did not help Nutcracker's army though, which, once retreat had begun, became more and more completely surrounded, and they lost men faster and faster until the unfortunate Nutcracker, with a very small band of his comrades, was brought to bay. That means they were trapped, close in front of the glass cupboard. "Bring up the reserves, Pantaloon! Clown! Drummer! Where are you?" So shouted Nutcracker, who yet hoped to see fresh troops pouring out of the cupboard. And they did come out, indeed. A few brown men and women made of gingerbread, with gilded faces, hats and helmets. But they were made of gingerbread, and they laid about so clumsily that they struck none of the enemy, but instead knocked the cap off their commander Nutcracker himself. Well, that's no good, is it? The light troops opposed them, and soon, because they were gingerbread, the mice bit through their legs so that they tumbled down all higgledy-piggledy, bringing down some of their own comrades with them. Surrounded by mice, Nutcracker was now in the most danger and distress. He would have sprung back into the cupboard to hide, but his legs were too short. Clara and Gertrude lay in a faint, They couldn't help him. Hussars and dragoons galloped over him as he cried in despair, "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" Now that's a very famous line, is that? At the moment that two of the enemies' battles seized him by his... at that moment, two of the enemies, the mice, grabbed him by his wooden cloak, and up rushed the Mouse King, squeaking out triumph from all of his 7 throats. Yay! Probably sounded something like that. Although 7 times as loud, that's 5. 7 times as loud and 7 times as scary, because Mouse King had 7 heads. "Oh, my poor Nutcracker!" sobbed out Mary. We mustn't forget that she's trying to watch all of this. She was unable to restrain herself any longer. Hardly knowing what she did, she snatched off her left shoe and violently flung it at the Mouse King, right into the middle of his troops. At that moment, all appeared to grow dim and to vanish away, but Mary felt in her right arm a still sharper pain than before, and she fell in a faint on the floor. Well, that was exciting. Oh, what has happened? What has happened? What has happened? Will Nutcracker be beaten by the mice, the Mouse King and all of his army? Will Mary be all right? Because it sounds like she's cut her arm quite badly. But she's thrown a shoe. And you can never underestimate how powerful a thrown shoe can be. I wouldn't recommend you try it yourself because it's super powerful, probably. Now then, Sue is back with the next chapter, and then I'll be back with you then. So, I need to go and calm down after all that hoo-ha and kerfuffle. This chair is brilliant because look, I can slide back in it. I'm just going to sit here for a while and gather myself. Oh, thank you so much for watching with us. Hasn't it been exciting? I'm going to switch you off and recline. You take care.